What number are we at?
78.
Oh, 70.
Yeah, right? Yeah, right.
You're in charge of numbers.
I have my cheat sheet. I'm in charge of numbers. You're in charge of everything else. Makes it easy. It's a good trade. We have a topic.
Yeah.
You waiting for you to stay still here?
Do I?
You waiting for me to stay still here?
Oh no, I actually wasn't.
I forgot. I forgot, but then you didn't say anything.
No,
I'm like,
no.
Wait, that's my cue.
I was somewhere else. I was like, wait, well, once again, it's a crazy topic that I don't know how to introduce because what's interesting to me is like I draw these concepts and I have these words that I assign to them, right? And I was thinking they sound very harsh. Like, we were talking about this yesterday again. Like they sound very harsh, right? Like word psychosis sounds harsh, but I actually use it in a positive way. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so partially I'm thinking maybe they get stuck in my head that they're not necessarily so far positively associated words, but there needs to be this recalibration or reassociation for the words that we use.
Right. I mean, I wonder if it's just that it's such a shocking word on purpose in order to
I think most of the time
kind of make you go, wait, what? No, I'm not psychotic, until you hear what we're about to say. You're like, oh wait, maybe I am.
Yeah, but it is
in maybe not in the medical.
Yeah, not sense. Medical. Yeah, not. I don't actually know what psychotic definition of it.
Clinical diagnosis, psychosis, but at the same time, it certainly sounds crazy when you hear it.
Yeah. So the topic, that's the word that comes, or that came. But I wanted to extend our previous conversation about, and this is something that we started talking after the last podcast. Kind of this was an extension of it. And I thought, okay, this describes perfectly of actually what's happened, of the processes we design or the actions we take, or really everything. I would say everything that we do in order to calm our nervous system into, state of relaxation. And I'm specifically starting like from the beginning, from when we're children or like babies were born. And then, how it sets in from there. And then part of it, what I want to bring in is how we then through this process normalize what should not be normal, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so as we expand on that, that's what I want to say. This process is designed to soothe our system, but in doing so, we lose touch with the intuitive nature of our reality that basically, in the hindsight, would go, oh, hey, this action or this event should be a shock to your system. It should be like a jolt to your system, right? It should be like some sort of trigger, right? But instead, we have been normalizing all these shocks and all these triggers in the past, that any one shock in the future that should be handled and addressed in a way with awareness just gets numbed out. And numbed out, which is, if you were to say numbed out and then therefore it's gone, that would be great. But no, it's numbed out and deposited away from processing. It's just stuck energy.
Yeah. Whenever you suppress a feeling, especially a negative feeling, why would you suppress a positive feeling? Whenever you suppress a negative feeling, it just sort of gets buried, and then like a seed that gets buried, it grows roots and sprouts and gets bigger and stronger.
It's stuck. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's stuck, but things continue to grow and fester.
Yeah.
And everything else gets
unlike a seed,
in.
it grows on the shadow. It grows on not looking at it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the light of looking at it that actually prevents that negative feeling from taking hold or growing stronger.
Yeah. It also breaks the feedback loop that makes that shadow grow bigger.
Right. Because the feedback loop is, oh, I don't want to think about this, so I do something else to not think about that. But then it comes up, and that makes me, drink some more. And then I forget about it. Everything's fine. But then, something at work happens, which reminds me about it. And then I have to drink some more to forget about it. And, replace drinking with whatever your thing is, drinking, running, cocaine, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. Cocaine's probably not healthy, but running probably is. But that doesn't make it better in the sense that it's just being used as something to distract or numb you away.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I say this, so we're not going into like the actual, so the reason we're doing this is we're kind of trying to unravel or showcase how this process gets set in. It's very innocent and very natural, but it almost seems like status quo, the norm. Like the society just doesn't even think about this, or we never pause to actually go and look into the process to actually recognize what it does forward.
Mm.
Right. So I don't know. I'm sure there's somebody out there who talked about this process and whatnot, but I want to kind of unravel and how blatant it is. Like it's just so blatant, but no, we don't look back and go, wait, look, it's just so blatant. And that's just like how we all are. But nobody acknowledges, talks about, and it's not rocket science to where like, as we unravel this, you'll be like, well, yeah, duh. But behind that, yeah, duh, is I want to highlight is like, but look what it does forward. Look what it sets in as a standardized pattern of information.
Yeah.
Or operation.
Yeah.
Really. Yeah. And so what I wanted to highlight is maybe like starting in the beginning. I had some memories that came to me from when I was a baby. And I'm reading a book that is kind of like forcing that intake, like forcing that deeper opening of the mind. And so I just had something that came in. And I remembered being laying in my crib as a child. And then I knew this from just like my mom talking. And then when we had our kids, my mom, made this as a suggestion as well. But being bundled very, very tightly. So like for some reason in Ukraine, when you had a child, there was this common belief, social norm, that you would bundle the child in the blankets extremely tightly. And one, it had something to do with the beliefs that the legs will be straighter. And then the child will grow longer, so like they'll be taller. I don't think any of that is actually true. But I think it's pain body, possibly social norm progress down of like, oh, you want to give the best to your child when you yourself are struggling. And, here's an easy thing you can do, which is basically bundle them past the point of freedom.
Yeah. I mean, everybody wants the best for their child.
Yeah.
And it's just, sometimes it's just misguided or, uneducated or whatever that.
Well, in
that
this
makes these
case, it's
things
not
happen.
even this misguided. I think it's just like, why not? Right now.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then, in the United States, I remember when we had our kids, to begin with, you have those, you have the onesies or even tops that have the little mittens.
Yeah.
That fold over the fingers.
Yeah. It was so that they can't scratch themselves with their little fingernails.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
what I thought.
That's what I thought too. So I thought, okay, well, maybe in Ukraine they did not have clothing with these little mittens that you fold over, which I don't even know if we folded our kids' mittens over. I don't think we did. And we never bundled them all that tight. Like we, to begin with, bundled them tight, but it was never to the point where they can't kick their legs and arms and unbundle themselves.
It was kind of like they can get out of it if they really want to.
Yeah. So I think mine was not that way, right? I think mine was like you literally lay there
like a burrito.
Yeah, like a burrito and mummy, just mummified, without. Yeah, and so I remember for some reason crying in the bed out of fear. Just to catch up, like I had a really, really strong fear of darkness, of shadows. Which like now I'm like, a curtain would have solved that. If they only knew that, a curtain would have solved it. But yeah, for some reason we didn't have curtains. And yeah, so I just grew really afraid of shadows and darkness. And for some reason, and I think it's because when I was younger, when I was laying in the crib, when I would get frightened or scared or something would influx me, I would then start crying or screaming. I don't know what. I think I started crying, but then eventually would go into screaming. And when that wasn't addressed for whatever reason, I don't know why it wasn't addressed. I don't remember that. But because I was bundled, I couldn't move and then basically soothe my system through movement, right? And so this is what I want to say is everything stems out of calming our nervous system, right? So if we have a status quo or a pranic force running up and down our entire body, right? And kind of like outside of our body and down through the body. When we get triggered or we get scared or we get frightened or we get hit or, whatever, basically there's an influx of some sort of influx, right? And then depending on how you respond to that influx, basically in this case, causes two-fold reaction. It's either you discharge this influx and then so your nervous system gets triggered. And then if you discharge the influx, then your nervous system basically continues to ramp up and down without the influx of, or is without the suppression of pranic force. But if you don't discharge, this what human life is, it basically gets trapped, right? Or gets trapped by you going, oh, look, I can discharge, so therefore I need to normalize. I need to normalize and calm my system somehow. And this is what I want to highlight is if you spend a lot of times in your childhood through being bundled too tight and being scared and not being able to move, sooner or later your body will need some other way in order to be able to soothe the nervous system.
Right. The natural way to discharge is usually through movement. Like if animals, if they get scared, right? Like the example we always hear is a deer. It'll freeze up in the headlights, or it'll run away from a coyote or whatever. But then when it's done, and that's a very natural thing. There's all the adrenaline and cortisol in the system to keep it alive. Flight or fight. Or freeze in the case of a deer. And that's fine. That's all natural. There's no getting around that. But then afterward, if you've ever been scared and you have that like adrenaline crash, it's just like, oh, you're literally shaking. You can't help but shake. And that's the natural way to get it out. In fact, what you should do is try to shake more. Literally shake it out.
Yeah, up and down, like jumping up and down.
Yeah, jumping up and down.
Yeah.
And the animals, they do that too. After they have some sort of traumatic thing, they shake it out of their system. Yeah. And that releases it physically releases the muscle, patterns. And B, it releases the psychic pranic energy associated with this traumatic event.
Mm-hmm.
But, you don't see very many high-functioning adults running around, jumping around, shaking.
You should.
You should, but you don't.
I tell kids now. I mean, now I know. Like anytime you have any kind of shocking event that just kind of like, even if you fall to begin with, like right, you fall and you stumble, and you have an adrenaline rush.
Yeah.
And then you kind of disoriented for a while, but then
That's
the second you come down and you're able to stand up and just kind of do the qigong shake, that is the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Even if you think everything is fine.
Right. And this, whether this is a physical event such as a fall, or whether this is a emotional event such as, something that happened at work or, traffic or whatever, it doesn't matter, because as far as your body is concerned, those are identical.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly the same physiological thing happens with the adrenaline and the cortisol. It's, if you took a blood test, someone who's chased by a tiger and someone who's stuck in traffic, in a way that actually affects them, they would look identical.
Yeah. And so what I want to say is, as we grow up as children in the situations, let's say from the baby's age where I'm scared, there's nothing I can do. I don't even understand what is happening to me, but I'm in the point of stress, right? And then I can't even shake it off, right? Like there's a stuck energy that gets basically suppressed. And I doesn't even go anywhere. It starts to build in one, density, but then two, what I want to say, it normalizes something that should never be normal. Like it's something that should never. We try to almost, in this case, if you use this example of me being scared in the dark, right? I'm scared in the dark. That is my truth. But because I'm afraid, and I don't even know how to deal with it or how to process it, and much less actually shake it out of my system, right? I'm teaching my body to start to become calm while I'm actually at the influx of scared. I'm forcing to accept this influx and normalize it.
That's probably the worst part of it. One off, it's not the end of the world, but once it becomes normalized, once it becomes repeated,
Mm-hmm.
then it really sets in, and you're really, nurturing that seed of trauma inside of you, not in a good way. You're making it grow, is what I mean.
Yeah. And so what I want to say is I remember it starting very innocently just from myself being a baby in the crib. But then think about later when your parents do something that you disagree with or you don't like, or it feels threatening to you, or it feels unsafe. And then you're a child, once again, hopeless. Now, in this case, you can move, but emotionally, right? Like you start to register emotional cues.
Yeah.
Right? Emotionally, this doesn't feel right. So to begin with, I think it gets set in physically, like physical threat. And in my case, fear of the shadow, right? But then later, because I have basically subconsciously started to normalize and trying to soothe the normal while I'm feeling threatened, later when that same threat comes in a verbal or emotional influx,
Right.
you react the same way.
Right.
I react the same way.
Yeah. And when it's that same threat, it's no longer the dark, but it's some sort of, it's unsafe.
It's unsafe.
Which is a really broad thing.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, anything can be unsafe. Oh, the tree, it looks like it might fall over. That could be unsafe. It's no longer contained to this one specific thing from childhood necessarily.
Yeah. Well, no, but what I want to say is a very obvious example would be if you're growing up in the household that when your parents do something, right, that you don't actually understand their actions behind it. Let's say it's even justifiable as a parent to do something, right? But you perceive it as threatening or you perceive it as like not right. And it rises your cortisol level because you have no way of addressing it or understanding it or having a conversation about it or even like shaking it off, right? Hopefully you throw a tantrum. I mean, let's say that would be the best case scenario.
Because like a tantrum, the parents, they all hate the tantrums, but that is literally them trying to get it out.
Yeah.
They're literally shaking. I mean, it looks like they're hitting, but they're shaking and they're screaming and whatever, and they are releasing that energy inside of them. Does it suck when it happens in the middle of a Walmart? Sure.
Yeah. We've been there. We've been there many times.
But it's not that you want to encourage the tantrum, but at the same time realize that the tantrum is their way out of it. Yeah.
So when you express an influx.
Yeah. And if, you just sent it to me, the advice that someone on Instagram said, when a child does something, quote, wrong or bad, the quick go-to is to either punish or, hey, you shouldn't do that, or, explain why,
that's not the right way to behave.
That's not the right way to behave, some sort of chastising or something like that. There's a whole spectrum of, beating them to, that wasn't nice. You should apologize to your brother, but the, a really productive way, which, I mean, luckily we haven't had a real opportunity to use it yet since I've learned it, but hopefully that'll be my go-to, is to try to, understand why. Ask them, what made you take the balloon from your brother or whatever? Why did you want to do that?
Like, what is it you're feeling?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. I actually acknowledge that this reaction is coming from something that we're not understanding.
They're not doing it just because they are bad or want to be bad. That is in service of something else, whether that's, I'm doing something, quote, bad in order to get attention because I don't feel like I ever get attention. Maybe.
Yeah.
Or, I took the balloon because I like blue and you gave me red. I don't know. It could be anything.
Yeah.
But that conversation really, I think, goes a long way.
Or it changes the narrative of what is it that you promote your child to be able to process.
Yeah. And on the flip side, I think one of the worst things a parent can do, well, there's a lot of things a parent can do wrong, but one that I really don't like is to not give a reason behind behind a rule or something, and just, because I said so. If you can give a reason, that goes a long way to help, I think, kids, at least if they're old enough to understand. Okay, this isn't just some sort of arbitrary, I'm doing it to punish you. It's, you can't play on the street because there are cars and you could get hurt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, but, this is another thing to point out. Generationally, right? I don't think my parents, maybe they read parenting books, right? But the parenting books that they were reading back in the 80s or 70s did not have like this psychological or emotional aspects of how to raise a child
Right.
to where they feel like they have a voice. And this is not any kind of attack on right versus wrong. It's just the narrative of how we're starting to understand how childhood processing, childhood development affects how we grow up as adult and how we function as adult.
Yeah.
Is completely shifting to where the new parents, right? Like when our kids have kids, the idea, these ideas hopefully will be so normalized to where the next generation is not being raised with this unbeknownst to anyone trauma.
Right.
Just not because the parents are trying to traumatize their kids, because we didn't know any different. We didn't know any better.
The advice given to us was, you put your kid down to sleep, and if they cry, you let them cry it out. And that's what we did. And, turns out that was not good advice. But that was the predominant advice. That was what the doctor said. That was what the book said. That was what everybody did. And, otherwise, I don't know. I don't know what the idea was otherwise.
But besides
that's
that,
what everyone said.
When we were raising our kids, never, especially back when I was in my 20s, would I have thought to go, oh no, what I did with everything. Oh, you don't behave this way. That's not, that's not normal. Like what you're doing right now is not normal, right? Which I'm telling the kid that he's wrong. What he actually intuitively feels, like in the natural way of behavior, this is not right. This is wrong.
Yeah.
Because I'm drawing my experience of like, oh, guess what? Like in this example, if I give you a balloon and I give Bobby a balloon and you yank Bobby's balloon, you're gonna run away, and steal it. That's not something that we do.
Right.
So the kid doesn't understand that this looks like you're stealing a balloon from Bobby and not sharing. That's not what you're saying. The kid goes, oh, look, I wanted green and you gave them blue or whatever. And instead of me being able to express that and just go, oh, hey, do you mind if we trade? Or, hey, can you change this for me? Or can you give me a different color or whatever? In this case, we're not even addressing how the kid feels. We're just saying how you feel is wrong.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So how you feel is wrong.
Right. You may not be explicitly saying how you feel is wrong or your feelings are wrong or your feelings are worthless, but that is how it is interpreted by the kid.
Yes.
That is how I interpreted it growing up.
Yeah.
It was never explicitly said.
No, but that's the only thing you can interpret, right?
Yeah,
if you behave in such way and the parents doesn't even ask you why, but they say, no, that's wrong. In your mind, the only conclusion you can derive from the statement is, oh, I feel this and it must be wrong.
Right.
As opposed to, let's figure out why you did what you did. So because, when we were raised as children, and, we're in our 40s, so this is going back to the 80s, but for sure 70s and 60s and 40s, no one was woke enough to understand how to have conversations. Nobody was taught to have simple conversations of a question of, hey, what caused you to be upset over this? Do you know what I mean? That we didn't even, I think I was trying, but for sure not as much as how much awareness I'm bringing to it right now.
Right.
But looking back through that filter on myself, the second my parents did something that was completely innocent on their end, and they were just communicating generalized term of like, oh, stealing is wrong, or like slapping someone in the face is wrong, or biting is wrong.
All of those are correct and true and good messages in and of themselves.
Yeah.
But the way that they are delivered to a child who's just done them, it's super easy for that to be interpreted by the child as, my feelings are wrong, my feelings are worthless, my feelings don't matter.
Yeah. So, something I just remembered that is obviously wrong, but I remember I used to bite people. And now I realize, oh, I was angry, right? I was angry. I'm not sure how I would ever work myself in the situation to where I was close enough to bite someone as opposed to kick them or hit them. No, biting was my thing. I was angry because they did something that upset me. But because that is not something that we did, like nobody said, hey, Tanya, why is it that you want to bite somebody, right? the obvious answer is, because I'm upset and I'm angry about something that they did. Well, but what is it that they did that made you angry or upset? And it's probably that they took something away from me, or they made me feel hopeless, or they disrespected me in some way, right? That is the truth, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like somehow I felt unsafe about the situation. And my retaliation was to bite them, right? But, the conversation is obviously it's wrong. That is wrong. You're being bad. Biting is bad.
Right. Which is true.
There's nothing wrong with that statement. Biting is bad. But the depth of the psychological damage that the buried feeling that I had of why I was biting people, and then that was bad. And the reason why I stopped biting people is not because I started process emotional trauma that I was feeling at the time. I branded that as bad, therefore I can't feel that way. And so this is what this podcast is. Then I have to bury the feeling.
Mm-hmm.
I bury the feeling.
You either bury the feeling or you find some other outlet for it.
Sure. But in my case, look, I feel this. My weird way of dealing with this is biting the person who's doing this to me. But instead of biting them, because
where did you bite them?
I usually hands. I don't know, hands,
the dirtiest
arms.
of places.
But that's what I'm thinking. Like right now, I cannot possibly analyze how I would ever get close enough to someone to bite them. But no, I'm assuming I was already in the proximity of them. So whatever we were doing.
Did you ever draw blood?
Sometimes.
Oh my gosh.
But no, I very quickly stopped biting. But occasionally, if I really, really got going, I would still have that influx to bite. But yeah, I don't think I did too many bitings. I don't know. So anyway, so yes, I remember I'm angry. I remember the anger, and the outlet for anger was to bite. And because biting is bad, therefore, naturally, this is completely natural. This is not any way to be blamed on my parents because they're saying the right thing. Biting is bad. But in my case, I interpret them, you're bad. You feel this way, therefore that's bad. I don't want to be bad because I'm already bad. I already feel like shit being angry, and biting is the outlet. But when they tell me I'm bad biting, then it's a double whammy to where I have to double bury the feelings. Do you see what I mean? Being told that I'm bad, I have to bury that. And then feeling this way is also bad, right? Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
And so that's two energy components that are stuck, being completely unaddressed and unprocessed in the very innocent statement that it is technically true that biting is not something that we do.
Right.
Right. But this is what I want to say is this whole process of growing up in the childhood environment with all of us, like it's still going on today, where instead of addressing of how we feel, how a child feels, because none of us are, psychologists equipped to be able to process this, right? Like finally, parenting is starting to bring this up.
Right.
But it's still not a norm, right? So when we grow up in this environment, which is everyone, quite literally everyone, we start to normalize our feelings that in fact should be addressed as not normal.
Normalize like the suppression of our feelings.
Yeah, we start to normalize the suppression as opposed to acknowledging the influx, the nervous system influx that it causes us to be angry or frustrating or feel hopeless or feel scared.
And that's what we mean by psychosis, back to the beginning of it.
Yeah. So the word that came to me was basically psychosis. We start to psychosis ourselves into calmness.
Yeah.
We design these neural pathways that are, the influx comes in, and the influx has to have a response. It has to have a response of either biting or shaking it off or talking and discussing this with somebody. There needs to be some sort of output and acknowledging that what I feel is true. My nervous system is an influx. I feel this very visceral, true influx in my system, and something needs to be done about it. But when we don't have an outlet for it, I'm not saying you should go biting people. Do not go biting people. But acknowledge it within yourself. Like, oh shit, I feel a huge influx in my system and I'm angry and I'm furious and I need to express this somehow. And if you don't have anyone to talk to, right? If nothing else, shaking it off. Just shaking it off would help this. But But because we, as children especially, we get into this pattern where there's not an outlet for it. We normalize the influx of cortisol and adrenaline and get used to the normal of very abnormal. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Does that
That's a good
normal of very abnormal? And so that's the word that comes up to me that I was giving is it is kind of self-created psychosis. Right? We don't know any other way to behave. And so later in life, how it presents itself, like if somebody were to smack you in the face, right? Because the polite thing to do in company is not to smack them back. I mean, most people should, I guess. But, or somebody says something rude to you. And the polite thing is, oh, I don't want to be mean because, that would be bad because I was like raised to be nice. Oh, you have to be nice. So if somebody's mean to me and I was raised to be nice and I don't want to be bad, right? Because that's what my psychosis was.
Yeah.
Then I won't even not be mean or I won't even stand up or I even verbalize anything when somebody comes into me. One, hopefully I will respond with physical abuse, but I will definitely not respond with emotional abuse.
Yeah. No, I was the same way. It was, it's always been very difficult for me to, even stand up for myself when there's something that's like, I can tell that this is not right. I can tell that this is not kind. There's some sort of, even malicious intent in there.
Yeah.
And, it's, my psychosis runs in a way that it is hard for me to even do anything about it. And I will just lock up and kind of freeze.
Yeah.
And that's how I've always been.
Yeah, but look up and freeze, but that goes into that trapped energy that is already sitting there.
Not even shake it out, but I just lock up and freeze. And then I continue to feel really, really bad about not doing anything about it into the future.
Yeah, which feeds a whole other portion of psychosis.
Yes. Tom Cruise was at some, I don't know, event one time, and some reporter came up to him with a fake microphone that was actually a squirt gun and squirted him in the face, as a joke. And, there's any number of ways that someone could handle that, right? Anything from, punching him in the face to laughing it off or whatever. And I thought he handled it really well.
But you could tell how much rage he had.
Yeah, maybe he wanted to punch him in the face, but he, there's 1,000 cameras on him right now. I probably can't punch someone in the face. But he, he kind of like, I think he kind of grabbed the guy's hand so he can't just run off. He said, well, why did you do that? Why would you think that's funny? That's a really mean thing to do. That was really mean. And he used his words. He called him out on it. There was no threats. It was just like, that's just mean. That is just a really mean in front of everybody.
Yeah, and the guy was trying to leave. And he's like, he's like, don't go.
Don't run away.
Yeah, why are you running away? You did this. Tell me why you did this.
Yeah.
He confronted the guy. Yeah.
Yeah. Which is probably like the healthiest way to deal with that. Even if inside you're just fuming and you just want to,
Yeah, you could tell he was fuming.
Yeah.
But you can tell he was trying to stay calm and at the same way do the best at addressing it as an adult. Of like, this is mean. This is not kind. Why did you behave unkindly?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, but we are trained not to stand up for ourselves in that way.
I mean, because it's like, that can't be deliberate. No parent wants their kid not to stand up for themselves.
No.
So it's all just this weird learned behavior through hints and cues and reading between the lines and interpreting things the wrong way, right? My parents wouldn't want me to not stand up for myself. We don't want our kids to not stand up for themselves. Your parents don't want that for you. So it's just, I find it really weird that that's so prevalent.
Wait, it's not weird. We literally just talked of why it happens.
No, I know.
It's because our parents were not equipped to, as children, cue us into expressing our emotional range. If they do something, let's be honest, if you do something as a parent and you fuck up, you don't want to be confronted by your 2-year-old. Let's be honest, especially, especially an adult. Like I just know how your parents are. My parents are a little bit more open to confrontation. But most of the time, you don't want to be confronted by your 3-year-old or 4-year-old.
Called out for doing something wrong by a little child when you're a high-functioning adult. Yeah. Right. And when you're going to admit that you're wrong and apologize, it's like, Yeah.
Yeah, but as a child, one, you don't even have the understanding that you can call your parent out. You know, that is not something, one, that parents facilitate. Just confront me if I'm wrong. I mean, now I encourage my children to do that with
Yeah.
me.
No,
I actually
yeah.
ask them, I'm like, if you think I'm acting out of line and I'm misbehaving, because if I get triggered, I misbehave and I behave blindly. Here's the safe word you can say to me. And, and I will, hopefully it will register. But please tell me.
Right.
Right. Because I'm prone to blindness still because I have these ingrained behaviors that we do not want to be confronted by anyone, much less our children.
The another problem with not having a way to express it, if you you can't stand up for yourself, eventually you will probably stand, if it just keeps happening over and over, you will stand up for yourself in a way that's blown way out of proportion. Eventually, someone, calling you names, you're just going to end up punching them in the face, which is too much, probably. You're going to explode in some way.
Yeah. But that's that energy has been suppressed. And then like when people talk about it, like, oh, that guy will totally go shooting someone. Like, right. If you,
yeah.
someone like
the school shooters and something, it's
the energy
they
is
couldn't
so on the
express
edge.
themselves in any other way. And finally they snapped and went way overboard.
Yeah. Yeah. But the system does not promote
Healthy discourse.
Yeah, healthy conversations where we are able to verbalize how we feel and then thus have our feelings be acknowledged and counted. Whether they're right or wrong, it doesn't even matter. Just being able to verbalize how I feel and not be branded as bad or no, you don't behave that way or no, that's not normal or no, you won't get Christmas presents if you do this. Do you know what I mean? Everything that we do as children basically, for the most part, goes unacknowledged and suppressed in some way. And to some extent through default, just because the nature in our society, at least how we were raised, just did not facilitate healthy conversations by our parents. Right. And in my case, I'm like, the whole, I see this as a pattern in Ukraine. And I think a lot of Asian cultures have this as well. There's this
deference to adults, to elderly.
Yeah, but it's almost like built into some sort of subconscious programming to where like, oh, you listen to me, period. Like, right, you are at the mercy of me. I'm not saying that is what my parents' desire was, but that is cultural. It's kind of it. Like, oh, the children always listen to the parents and they'll always behave. And but then by default, if that's the case, nobody actually ever questions or even allows to be an idea that the parent could be wrong.
Right.
Because if you're raised in a household where the parent is always right, then by default, the child is always wrong. And if the child is always wrong,
or you're drinking the Kool-Aid and you're on board in order to be right.
No. But the truth is,
if you have a different opinion, you're wrong. Yes.
If you have a different opinion and you're wrong, but then by default, if you ever have an angelic influx where you're like, wait, this doesn't feel right to me, you numb yourself away from that healthy, like vector scale of what is right and what is wrong. What will I allow my system to acknowledge and feel versus like, oh yeah, my system isn't soothed. I'm not in an influx, everything's okay. But when the system is soothed and all of a sudden you're like, wait, I'm in an influx, but it seems like my parents are doing everything right because by default they're right. Guess what? Then you're telling your system, this is wrong. You are wrong. You're not, this influx that you're feeling within you is actually wrong. So what you're doing is you're training yourself not to listen to your own intuitive body cues to where you can acknowledge, express your nervous system's arousal.
Right. I mean, the idea of listening to your elders, on one hand, yes, they have more experience. Yes, they have all this supposed wisdom, which may be valuable. But because they are older and because they have more experience doesn't necessarily make them right 100% of the time. If they were right 100% of the time, we would still have slavery. and women would still not be able to vote because if
But in this case, even if they're right, like my parents are right about not biting other people, right? But I feel something within me that's not addressed.
oh yeah, that's
So in
you're
this-
right. That's an even bigger issue.
this
It's not.
case-
It isn't even right or wrong. It's you can't even express your opinion, even if it's right or wrong.
No, but in this case, they're not asking me the right questions. They're not going, Tanya, why in the heck are you biting people? Right? That is not the conversation we're having. I agree that they're right. I agreed back then that they're right, and I agree right now that they're right. And I would say the same thing to my kids. It's just not, polite to go biting people. But that is not the conversation that we should be having. The conversation is you feel an energetic influx in your system. Your cortisol levels are up. Your adrenaline is spiking up. You're obviously angry and upset about something. Let's have that conversation. But that is not, so because we're not addressing the right subject, this blanket statement goes in into parents are always right. And then what I feel is always wrong.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
And so then this is the psychosis because we're not allowing our intuitive system to allow us to feel this energetic influx that we need to process, talk to, actualize. And as children, we don't have the, psychiatrist within us that is able to talk us through of why we're feeling what we're feeling. We learn to desensitize ourselves to abnormal behaviors from other people. And then if we have an influx to that abnormal behavior, we suppress it because we don't want to be bad. We don't want to come across as weird. Oh, this is not socially accepted. Oh, look, other people are always right and you're wrong.
Suppress it or act out, I guess, but that's in a different way. Act out in
Well, acting out because you're suppressing the actual feeling and then you're going about it doing something else.
Yeah, it's all of that is to achieve the same goal of I feel bad, I feel angry, I feel like my feelings don't matter, opinions don't matter, whatever.
Yeah.
And either you
You feel
go in
unsafe.
and you hold it all inside and bottle it up, or you go out and hit mailboxes with baseball bats.
Yeah. Well,
But it's all to the same end. It's just how you happen to be.
like
express it.
the perfect example that like we have in all schools, like, oh, you have a boy, right, who's a bully, right? Like how many boys do we have at schools who get identified as labeled as bullies? Oh, like he's a troublemaker, like he's a bully, right? Or whatever, right? Well, the truth is that boy feels helpless and unheard and suppressed elsewhere, right? Through this parental uprising, right? Of his opinions, his feelings are not being addressed elsewhere, right? And because they're not being addressed, they still need an outflow. So instead, if his type of personality is not to lock up and go in the closet and cry themselves to sleep, right? The other outlet on the other half is to express themselves physically. Like, look, I have this energetic influx and I need to process it somehow. And then the bullies basically pick someone who is weak, who's not gonna hurt them back, and pick on the weak ones because that is their outlet to this unprocessed trauma that they're feeling.
Yeah. Now it gives them some feeling of control, some feeling of superiority, some feeling of strength that they don't have elsewhere.
Yeah, because what this is like a textbook example because they feel unsafe and unheard
right
somewhere else.
Yeah.
Right. Like, and that's like, that's not rocket science. That's like, oh, that's just the stereotype. Oh, the reason why he's beating up somebody is because, his home situation is bad.
Yeah.
Well, duh. But that is an extreme example that we are all aware of why bullies are bullies. But we are that way all the time, period. Like, I think everybody is that way all the time, period.
Right.
Unless you're doing this work of awareness to go, look, as a child, and when there was this blanket of, oh, you don't behave this way, it just simply sent a message of, you feel something and that's not right. You feel something and we're not going to address that. We're just going to say no. And that builds all kinds of stuff,
Right.
and this is what I want to say is how it projects itself forward into our life has endless amount of expressions. Some become bullies, some become manically depressed, some become like prone to being victims and always choosing an abuser to abuse them. Like all of the mental problems that we have stem out of this one set.
Right.
Just one set of onset psychosis that we establish to ourselves where we suppress our emotional awareness of how we feel.
Yeah.
The solution to this is not to address 20,000 different diagnoses. The solution is one. We were told that what we are intuitively feeling, energetically feeling in our form is not true, period.
Yeah.
And then we designed slew of bullshit, like quite literally bullshit, of what we were using in order to soothe our nervous system away from that statement.
Right.
That we decided onto ourselves. We decided that what you feel is not going to be addressed. Therefore, you need to somehow start to cope with this truth.
Right.
And that truth is you're just not allowing yourself to feel how you're feeling.
Yeah. Yeah. You feel it, but then you do everything you can. You invent your own ways to not feel it.
Yeah.
The solution is, of course, to actually feel it.
And not run away from that
And not
feeling.
run away from it, because it is unpleasant. And it's really easy to understand why one would want to suppress it or act out in order to release it, or whatever it is. But it isn't super obvious that sitting with this uncomfortable, unpleasant feeling is actually the right thing to do.
Well, because we've been trained not to go there.
Yeah.
Because if you have an uncomfortable feeling,
you don't even need to train someone not to go there. That's just what you would do. It's like, oh, if I touch the hot stove, it burns, so I don't do that anymore. Oh, if I feel this, I don't want to feel it, so I do whatever I can to not feel it. It's easy with a hot stove. You just don't do that action anymore. But with something that's coming to you, right? Maybe whether it's your parents or your friends or school or whatever it is that's making you feel a certain way, if you can't avoid that scenario, you have to design some way to not feel it. And whether that's, numb yourself out or suppress it or act out or whatever, it's the same thing. It's just you can't avoid your parents when you're 2 years old. You have to come up with a way to cope. And they're just not healthy ways to cope. Very few people end up with healthy ways to cope, being modeled for them or, developing them on their own.
Well, to begin with, it's very innocent. It's not even like as obvious as a hot stove.
Right. A hot stove is really, really obvious.
To begin with, it's just like,
subtle.
Oh, look, you feel angry and your parents say, no, that's bad. And that's the only thing that you can even process, right? If I'm biting somebody because I feel angry and there's think about how much fucked up shit has to be happening inside my head to where I can justify going and biting someone.
How old were you?
I don't know. They said that I started very early. I don't even remember when I started. I want to say partially that's probably why I never went to preschool. It's because they were afraid I was going to bite people. No, but that is, the amount of unprocessed trauma, right, that I'm feeling, that a processed trauma gets set in it by just them not even being in the position where they understand that something is happening to me. Like right now, not that long ago, I was having a conversation with my dad. And he was like, yeah, I don't know, like we would give you money for lunch and then marshut, I cannot pronounce it because it has an R in it, but marshutka, okay, has an R in it. So it's basically as a private taxi in Ukraine. And so in order for me to get home from school, I had to take like 3 or 4 different buses or buses. But sometimes sometimes they would give me enough money to where I could take this private taxi. And it's not like a private taxi to where it's just a taxi driver and me. It's like a minibus.
Mm.
But it's not free because it's private.
Mm. But it takes you from here to there without having to
yeah, honestly,
exchange.
like I don't even know why they would do that, because like I could wait longer for a bus and do that. But sometimes I would splurge, and if it's raining or snowing and it's cold, and there's one coming and I don't know when the next bus is going to come, sometimes I would indulge myself and jump on that. And my dad would say like, yeah, we would give you money for lunch or for this taxi thing, and like you would like save it and like not. And so he noticed I had this huge aversion to spending money out of scarcity, right? And he's like, yeah, I don't know why you were just so like living in scarcity, right? And I thought, look at this. He's still right in his 70s right now, confused of why I was reacting this way. But to me, that was the only truth. To the point where he said that to me, and he was in shock, and I was in shock that he did not know that wasn't our truth, right? And it was very obvious to me the disconnect between the life he was living and his reality of what our financial situation was and what my idea of our financial situation was. And it was just like we were in the same household. And the opinions that I derived based on what they said or what they did or conversations that I overheard and how it was never addressed or positioned, or I was even able to bring up, hey, are we struggling with money? Or, hey, are we going to have food tomorrow? Do you know? Like I was not part of those conversations, but I was privy to them just through overhearing it. And his status quo was completely different than my status quo. And he's confused right now why, like, when I was a kid, I was just so in scarcity over money. And right now, I'm like, that is like the only truth I know. Right? As a 40-year-old, I'm still like, wait, you're telling me that like wasn't our status quo? Which is so sad, because at the time, the only thing that needed to happen was some sort of normal conversation where we go, Tanya, we're fine on money. Right? Like, so that's why whenever I get triggered and I'm blind, I'm like, I just need to have a conversation that we're fine on money.
Yeah.
Now, do I still need to address the childhood trauma that is still there, that is being poked? Mm-hmm. Yes. But in the immediate soothing of the system just needs to happen on like, hey, how many thousands of dollars do we have in the bank? And I just need a number. Yeah. And so to begin with, that is what I need to soothe it. And then if nothing else, then I can go into that space where I can work on that trauma.
This was it was in this house, but maybe 8 years ago. It was back when I used to put Aiden to sleep. At some point he expresses to me that he's afraid that we don't have enough money to buy stuff, because Aiden's never really wanted stuff in the way that maybe Annabelle has.
My gosh, the Aiden wanted toys.
This was, well, maybe he just felt guilty about it. I don't know what it was, but he was really concerned.
But I think that was on me. That I made him feel guilty about wanting to spend
He was
toys.
just really concerned that we don't have money. And even late, up until maybe a year ago, he would be like, there's this game and it's like $5. Is it okay if I get it?
Yeah, but I think that's my fault.
Right. And at some point I'm like, anything under whatever, you can just get it. It'll be okay. Cause he just, he doesn't spin stuff in the way that maybe Annabelle would, left unchecked.
Yeah. Well,
but yeah, no, I'm like, here, let me just literally pull up the bank and show you. And he's like, oh, okay. And that made him feel so much better. And I'm like, no, we're
the trigger is there.
The trigger's
there.
But I don't know. I didn't have a good sense of my parents' financial situation growing up, other than I never really worried about it. But at the same time, I also felt this like need to save, right? I didn't buying candy, buying whatever was a real treat.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, I almost felt like I needed to earn or save or whatever, double that in order to spend that.
Yeah.
Like, so the savings would definitely outweigh the spendings.
Yeah.
And there's still some of that.
Yeah, but here's the thing is, I want to say, and this is maybe a really important thing to point out, intuitively as a children, we're able to read information that is not available to us in a physical sense. So if our family is feeling distressed and they're just not even talking to each other, they're just vibrating distress financially, right?
Mhm.
What we would do as children, because we're intuitive, we would pick that up.
Sure.
And so you would read the circumstances, you would read the energy of the room, and you would actually telepathically kind of literally know what they're thinking.
Yeah.
And that was our status quo as children. Like everybody's status quo as children is just that. We just knew this information. So even if you technically did not overhear your parents talk about money, chances are whatever the vibrational frequency of
I'm
the
sure.
household is,
I'm
or
sure.
any one parent, you would know that. But we were never taught that we would
Yeah.
know that.
If not, you may or may not know that, but you would know there is something wrong.
Yes, there's
maybe
something
it's
wrong.
money, maybe it's this,
Yeah, yeah.
maybe it's that, maybe it's health, who knows, but there's something wrong and you feel it. No,
Yeah, yeah.
absolutely.
So intuitively, we used to pick up all these extrasensory information as children before we shut off that sensory perception.
Yeah.
Because that was just our ability, before age of 7.
Yeah.
So we knew all kinds of stuff.
Even now, if you meet someone, especially someone you're familiar with, you can tell when they're acting a little different. You can tell when something's bothering them,
Mhm.
and that's like the base level of this. But yeah, you can just tell.
But intuitively, we used to have all this information and all this knowledge that would come our way that would generate triggers. And because one, nobody's addressing it with us, and two, we don't even understand that what is it that we're feeling, right? The only thing that we can do as children is simply to normalize this influx. Like, oh, look, I'm reading my father's energy, or let's say my mom and dad are arguing about money, which I've heard my mom and dad argue about money. But as a child, that's not a adult conversation you can be part of. That you can't really, if they're arguing, the last thing you want to do is get into that conversation. You kind of hide and like try to stay away from that, right? But at the same time, that is a huge influx that you're feeling of uncertainty and hopelessness and unsafety. And then because you have no outlet and you have no one to talk to, you don't even know how to process that, and your parents never addressed that with you, guess what? Now you have to learn how to normalize influx of cortisol, and then you're teaching yourself not to address cortisol influxes as an adult.
Yes. That learned behavior sticks with you for life unless you do something about it. And not only that, it sets in deeper and deeper and deeper.
Yeah. And so that is how energy gets trapped, one. But that is how we set in personal psychoses in order to be able to just simply continue to live. In order to continue to live and basically not be nervous wrecks all the time, we start to normalize and suppress our intuitive feelings of cortisol influxes, of stress, of nervous system, going haywire, and we try to bury it, and we suppress it, and we bury it, and we distract, and we pretend like it's not there. And that is really kind of like the only understanding that we need to have intuitively right now, if you're trying to gain awareness, if you're trying to awaken, is not like, oh, look, I do this or I do that. That's fine. You can address all of these like little outlets that you have come up with, because that's kind of like the surface level of how you can start to look into that. But when you realize of like, oh yeah, here's all these little things that I do, but you can just go directly to the cause of like, admit to yourself that you, just by the mere nature of being a human on earth, and this is how things used to be, and this is how life is, you started to okay for yourself the discomfort that you were feeling. And then thus left it as discomfort.
Yeah.
Yeah. So wait, there was the other half that I wanted to make sure that we addressed, that it was part of this, which was what? Did we address that? I said that is how.
And we tied it back to, that's the psychosis that we were talking about is not, is to like pretend you don't feel how you actually feel and come up with all these ways to justify it or act around it or suppress it.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess maybe just to kind of wrap that up, that is basically what it comes down to, is any of our actions into the adulthood that basically have these influxes and we're not prepared. We don't have the toolkit of how to actually go, wait, I feel something. It might or might not have anything to do with the situation. How do I address it? Because we don't have that. It's just a part of normal behavior, because to begin with, as child, we were trained away from that behavior. We simply distract ourselves with something else. Addiction is the obvious one, right?
Yeah.
Like, not even address what you're feeling, just distract yourself with addiction about anything at all. Or feel it and then go, oh shit, it sure does feel like shit. What can I do to make myself feel better?
Right. Which is half a step better, because at least you realize that you feel bad.
Yeah, like sometimes, what I used to do is like, oh, I sure do feel like shit. I don't actually know why, but let me go run. I used to do that all the time.
Yeah.
No, at the hindsight, that's still not too bad, right? Because it's healthy.
Better than heroin.
And if nothing else, here's what your body's trying to do. You're trying to take this energetic influx.
Running is a shaking out in a sense.
Yeah. So it is a semi-healthy way to address it.
Right.
But just realize that is maybe why you run. Is because once again, you feel something, you haven't gotten around to processing what it is, but the shaking of the running of the nervous system basically shaking itself off does make you feel good. So it is a healthy way to suppress or to release the stress and the cortisol levels.
Right. But at the same time, you're not actually addressing what the real issue.
The trigger, because you will get re-triggered.
Yeah, you're not letting yourself feel it. This is a way around feeling it, so you don't have to feel it.
Yeah. The right way to go about it, you can still run.
You can still run.
You can still run with acknowledgement of like, hey, I'm running to begin with to soothe the nervous system. You can actually do that. You can go, look, I get an influx, I get stressed out. The immediate solution that I can do is I can run, and that will soothe the nervous system. But then make sure to then take time and sit for 10, 15, 20 minutes, either meditate on it or just simply think on it.
I mean,
journal it.
Or do it. I find runs as like a moving meditation, and it is a wonderful time to think. Like you could do that during your run.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. Like, oh, look, I'm running because this is bothering me. Oh, look, this triggered me.
Yeah.
And this triggered me because of this and this. Just make sure you go deep enough to the childhood level of where it actually hits for real, as opposed to the surface level.
Yeah.
Okay. I almost find it difficult to go into the deep childhood level. Like, it's easier to hit the surface level when you run, but to go deeper and to start, really go into that suppressed density, it's almost harder for me to do it when I'm running, unless it's easier for you. But yeah, like, I think that requires calmness of the system, and while you're releasing it through the running, you're releasing the cortisol and adrenaline through the running, you're still in it, and so you can surface dwell. But after the run, maybe go into the calm state and actually go into the root cause of the problem.
Yeah, I mean, maybe. I don't know. I find that the almost mindless repetitiveness of the run kind of puts me in a state.
Yeah, maybe it works for some people. For me, it doesn't. Like, it definitely releases cortisol, it releases the stress hormones, and then then after that, like, when I stretch, I notice my system calm, right? Like, through the stretching, I notice my entire system just go into that delta, or low alpha, or whatever it is. But then if I take time to meditate after that, is when I can really kind of like have a clear picture. Like, I think what it is like, to begin with, when you're in the influx, you almost need to like lower the stress level, lower the nervous system, until you can actually even like be able to go into some sort of
right. Because if you're all worked up about something, it might be harder right then to go sit down and meditate, because it will be harder to clear your mind. You'll be too focused on it. It'll be too thinky.
Yeah. So anyway, I hope this is helpful, because like, after I started thinking about it, I'm like, oh my gosh, this explains everything. Right?
Yeah.
So like, that idea, like, not everyone can say, like, in your case, you can clearly say that you were gaslighted as a child, right? But I can't say that I was gaslighted as a child, because my parents always wanted to hear from me, and they always wanted to be engaged, and they always wanted my life to be good. Like, it was very obvious on their end. But regardless of them being the way they are, the simple nature of me feeling something and them just not even knowing that there's a such thing to ask of how you feel automatically sets in this idea of being gaslighted. So, gaslight is, hence you almost gaslight yourself. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
They're not the outlet for gaslighting, but you set in this idea that, oh, how I feel is actually not how I feel. What I feel right now is wrong. And so that just gets set in. And so then, intuitively, this is what's really interesting. I guess maybe the other half of it that is really enlightened half of it is we have this amazing intuitive ability as ourselves, as these very multidimensional beings that are able to get information from other sources and are able to think outside of the box. And we have all this creative power available to us. Like as children, right? Think about like how all these children like say all this stuff as if it's truth.
Yeah.
Because they're reaching potential outside of our physical dimensional realm. They're open to this larger picture.
Yes.
And that's intuition. But because intuitively we start to deny our own truth of our own feelings, like we start to suppress that in order basically to continue to function, we literally turn that off. So the reason why we lose our intuitive and psychic ability or our clairvoyant ability as children, that goes hand in hand with this idea that we are intuitively start to shut off the truth of how we feel. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
Right? Like when you go to your parents, like, oh, hey, I saw Uncle Bobby and he told me that, I should go over to the yard and pick up a shovel and put it back in the closet. I don't know. And mom is like, oh yeah, you're so silly. Uncle Bobby has been dead for 2 years. Right. Do you know what I mean? And so that right there, intuitive ability, parents go, oh, you're so silly. And then you discount that, right? And so then in your mind, you register, wait, there's this extrasensory perception that I just experienced. Mom and dad are always right. By default, they are as a child.
Yeah.
Therefore, what I just experienced must not be my truth.
Right.
And so this is like non-trauma version of it, but like the actual other part of ourselves, so which is clairvoyancy and intuition and, psychic behaviors.
Yeah. I mean, and just like, imagine, you just think about how, I had the word a second ago. It's not creative. The creatives, the imagination that children have. We call it imagination, as if almost to discount it. It's all make believe. It's all this and the, whatever. And maybe some of it is, right? The play, but when a kid is playing with a toy car, it is a real car to the kid. Mm-hmm. When they're playing with a toy boat or the toy truck or the toy, I don't know, doll or whatever, those are real, and they're really doing things, and it is real. They are able to take these things that we adults think are little pieces of plastic or whatever, and make real scenarios out of them.
The feelings are the same.
Their feelings are the same to the child. It is no different than if it was real cars going through the sand. That is something that most adults have lost.
Well, because we shut off that magical way of being.
And
because at some point that magical way of being became not true.
Right. Because at some point we're like, oh, well, okay, now I'm a fancy 10-year-old and, these cars aren't, I know these are toy cars and they aren't real cars. And, your fancy 10-year-old turns into a fancy 40-year-old and, oh my gosh, I can't play with toy cars. That's kid stuff. I need to be a real proper adult and worry about, stock market and taxes and I don't know what adults worry about.
Yeah. I mean, as a kid, you always want to play the next game, right? But yeah, it's very real. Is that the intuitive truth that we feel within us includes feelings, includes emotion, includes magic, includes make-believe, right? Includes extrasensory perception, right? But the second we start to basically go, oh, what I feel is not true, because, either directly or indirectly, you perceive that message from your parents, that we all do, right? Like our caretakers, by default, will just say, "Oh, that's not right. That's not a good thing. That you're doing the bad thing." Then we basically start to set in this narrative where we are wrong. Biting somebody is wrong, but then the feeling that I have behind it is also then becomes wrong. That's a very generalized statement. Like, I believe that I'm wrong.
Right.
There's both truth in it and not truth in it within that truthful statement from my parents that this is wrong.
Right, because wrong is such a loaded term that can mean a whole lot of different things that are both accurate and not accurate.
Well, because the truth of my action is not being addressed, and what they're reacting is the surface behavior.
Right. The surface behavior may be wrong, but we interpreted it as I am wrong or I am bad.
What I'm feeling is wrong.
And what I'm feeling is wrong. What I'm feeling is bad. And therefore I can't do that, or I can't. It's not even I can't do that.
It's
maybe
wrong.
that. It's I can't feel that.
Yeah. Well, no,
which
because
is much more
you
damaging.
still feel it, right? But now you have to suppress that feeling.
You have to feel it, but now you feel bad about feeling it, which loads extra crap on top of it.
Yeah, but you continue to feel it, right? And so we suppress the feeling, but then within that suppression, we suppress ourselves. Our true psyche, our true nature, or actually the true version of us gets completely suppressed.
Right.
And kind of really strangely, only when we start this process of awareness and enlightenment or walking towards gnosis, like whenever you start to search for yourself, you figure this concept out that like, oh, the reason why I suppressed myself, I didn't even know she's in the camera. The reason why I suppressed myself is because I was taught, or I basically trained myself to believe that what I feel is not true.
Right. And then you start remembering all these things from childhood. You're like, oh my gosh, I felt this way, or I've always felt this way, or here's something that made me feel this way when I was young.
Yeah. But it kind of like, I realize now, in my case, it just stems directly from these generalized statements of truth. Oh, that's bad. And then I took it as I'm bad.
Yeah.
And then, oh, you're behaving that way, that's bad. And therefore, or look, I feel this, therefore it must be bad, because I did not separate the feeling from the action.
Absolutely. I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah. And that's it. That's like, to some extent, it's just, like I would say it's psychosis for self-soothing.
Yeah.
But it very much positive, because that psychosis is the thing that kept me alive up until now.
Right. I mean, that's the thing. All these things that we do, which, on the surface don't seem like great ideas, or they don't make sense, or, you're like, well, that's not really a healthy behavior. They're all there as a self-protection mechanism, right?
Yeah.
Whether that's shutting down, whether that's acting out, all the behaviors throughout my life that are like, well, kind of wish I hadn't done that, or kind of wish I had done that. It's all there because at some level, your psyche thinks this is the safest thing to do. This is the right, maybe not right thing. This is the right thing to do for me right now. This is the best course of action. It's all to protect, it's all the ego trying to protect itself, to keep you alive, to keep you safe, or at least feeling safe, to keep you feeling like you have control.
Yeah. To soothe your system.
Yeah.
Right? It's not the best solution, but it's the immediate solution to soothe the system.
Right.
Our entire life, if you have drawn zero awareness to it, has only been there. What is the quickest way I can go about to soothe the system?
Yeah.
I'm in an influx. I'm actually now allowing myself to feel what I need to feel, because I have not developed the practice of awareness. And the only practice we have developed with, how do I soothe the system right now? Because otherwise it feels threatening.
Yeah.
It feels unsafe. How do I soothe it? And so that's what this comes down to. It's just like, there's absolutely nothing wrong about the way how I have been for 40 years. Do I wish that was different? Yes. But now looking back, I can see my entire chain of behaviors, everything that I have done that I can deem as wrong and right, just solely been through this lens of, as long as you're not allowing yourself to feel how you actually feel, everything else will just be this very quick solution to feel calm when you don't.
Right. But
when you don't feel calm, and this is a distraction to somehow feel calm right now.
Right. And that works in that gets us to tomorrow, but that's not a way out of that cycle.
Yeah.
That works, but you're just stuck in there. Now you have to run. You shouldn't run because you feel like you have to run. You should run because you want to run.
Yeah.
I mean, you shouldn't feel like you have to drink alcohol, but maybe, I guess, drink if you really want to drink, if that's your thing. Whatever it is, you become a slave to whatever your coping mechanism is, whether that's going inside and curling up in a ball and crying yourself to sleep, or alcohol, or going around and knocking over mailboxes with baseball bats. You lose your sovereignty to whatever your coping mechanism happens to be.
Yeah. Because in the immediate term, it makes you feel good.
Right.
It releases the cortisol and adrenaline.
Now I can get through today.
Yeah. Which is, it's kind of sad that as long as we are in this blindness and we don't do this work,
right,
that's the only way I can see myself, all of my behavior, behavior.
I know. Looking back, it's like, oh my gosh, my whole life was just make it to tomorrow. Just got to make it to tomorrow.
Yeah.
Which
really
is
sad.
Which is a really crappy way to live, right? Because there's a lot of, for me at least, there's a lot of like anxiety in how am I going to make it to tomorrow?
Mm-hmm.
Which is just a whole nother level of now there's anxiety to do it.
Yeah, no, everything. So the second that intuition gets shut off and we're not able to address how we actually feel, and we start to suppress that process of like just natural process of allowing yourself to feel, and then go, why do I feel this way? I wonder what is actually behind it. Like if we can stay calm and just have that normal adult-like conversation within ourselves, like the frantic way that my entire body, my entire system has went by to just soothe that away has been like my entire life, really. My entire existence now can be looked back at just not being able to have this honest conversation within myself of how do I actually feel?
Right.
And why? It's sad.
It is.
It's sad.
It is sad. At the same time, you can always choose to be different today.
No, but it's empowering to realize that, right? Like as messed up as I think that I am, and think about spending 40 years acting to diminish stress and diminish cortisol, and seeing all of these ways of behaviors are just there not to feel the stress. It's kind of almost empowering, because right now I go, yeah, if I feel stress and I feel the influx now, instead of doing anything else, really, like quite literally anything else, I can just allow myself to go, the only struggle that I have, or the only obstacle that I have, is that my personal choice of trying to run away from feeling what I actually feel. And that's it, right? Recognizing for 40 years, the ingrained pattern of behavior, the easy pattern of behavior is, let's do everything possible not to feel what you actually feel. And if I know that, right? If I know that that is the only thing that my body has known so far, now I can go, okay, I know that's the easy. I know that is just grabbing sugar, going for runs, talking about something else, pretending like it's not there, not admitting to the fact that you feel this influx in your system is really the only thing that I have been doing. Let's go look the other direction of like, wait, what are you actually feeling? What are you actually feeling? Not somebody else. Whether it's right or wrong, it doesn't even matter. You could be wrong about feeling that, but just admitting to yourself that you feel it.
Yeah, yeah.
And like, it's super empowering in a way.
Yeah, it is.
So yeah. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening.